Good morning, Northpoint. Good morning. Man, it feels like it's been a long time. I think the last time I was here with you, we had just gotten out of school, and it's already fall, which just seems crazy to me. Does anybody else already recognize it's fall? Well, okay, so a couple of you in first service, no one. They were like, no, it's not fall. And then I asked this question, did anybody actually decorate for fall like a month ago? Some of you are pointing at your spouses. That's rude. But yeah, but yes, those people are their own people. I get it. But it just feels like it's been forever. So it also means last time I was here, our lobby was only 2/3 full. So that's neat, but also it means I probably, since it's been crazy and it's been all summer, I probably haven't had the chance to meet you. My name is Jennifer Mazzola, and I'm part of the teaching team here at Northpoint. Just a little bit about me. I'm married to an amazing guy named Sal. I know Buck always says his beautiful wife, Jill. I thought about saying my beautiful husband, Sal, but I thought I'd just go with amazing. I have 2 sons. Both are in college. My oldest son goes to Texas Tech. And yeah, which just to clarify, because I know that it's a T and a T, and so Tennessee Tech also has the same logo, so he goes to Texas Tech. My youngest son actually goes to UT. Yeah, and I know that some of you, I think the majority of the room was University of Texas, not the University of Tennessee. And I share that because I didn't realize that some people were confused, and then someone sent me this article the other day about how there was a conversation around who's the real UT in the SEC. And so I just want to be clear. He goes to University of Texas, but I'm actually from Tennessee, so the real UT. Oh no! Wow, guys. It's like a hostile room. What's funny about it is, I did a couple reasons. One, I don't actually care. That's kind of what's funny, is I actually don't even care about football. But I also think that the guys can't be the only ones that get up and talk about football. So every now and then I just wanted to make sure and share something. Really, what both of my boys being in college means is that we're empty nesters, which is, yes, oh, yeah, right, Yeah, I know, right? But here's the thing, I actually love it when my boys are home. I do, when they're home for the summer, or a weekend, or an hour, because what was it, a calm, clean, empty nest becomes not those things anymore. Now, all of a sudden, we got some complaining, there's not enough snacks in the house, there's not enough food, they're up all hours of the night, and I just have gotten used to, really quickly, my own house, kept the way I like it, stocked with food that I like, doing things my way, and then they come home. But I do miss them. I really, really do. I miss them a ton, and also don't miss them at the exact same time. So I share all that to say, I have gotten used to doing things my way, and my world now as an empty nester kind of revolves just around me and my husband. We are wrapping up a series called The Way of Jesus. We've been just taking an honest look. It's been a long series. Actually, if this is your first time, I'm kind of wrapping us up. I totally want to encourage you to go back and check out the other 4 weeks. If you're visiting for the first time, this is the end of a big conversation. And we started the conversation kind of laying the foundation that in Jesus, we find the way, discover the truth, and experience the life we're actually meant to live. And then we built on that just by exploring what it actually means to follow Jesus. When Jesus says, follow me, it's actually an invitation he makes more than any other invitation across all 4 Gospels. Over 20 times, Jesus says, follow me. What does that actually look like? And we looked at practical things, how you can actually practice walking out your faith. And we talked about what it looks like when actually it gets difficult to do that. And so they've sent me out here to kind of wrap all that up. And I get to tell you this morning, if we're talking about that Jesus is worth following, that everybody's invited to follow, there are practical ways to follow even when it gets tough, then I'm here to tell you that the life you're made for and all that is 100% not about you. That's great. That's the one they gave me to do. Now, I'm the one that gets to tell you that really all that culminates in this idea that this whole point of following actually has very little to do with you. And I think that can be confusing for us because I think we live in a culture that is obsessed with self-care. We have books and podcasts and conferences that will help you say yes to less, build the ideal life, learn how to have difficult conversations, manage your stress, understand your emotions, and all these things are so good. There's a lot of good stuff, but I wonder a few things. This is what I want to talk about this morning is, one, how did we get here? Did we always live in a culture of self-care? Was this just part of what we were supposed to be doing this whole time? And then what is this idea? We have a whole industry around it now. It's actually a political talking point now. What is it actually doing to us and for us. And how does all that compare to what we see in Jesus? How does that fit into, or does it fit into follow me? Now, another thing to know about me, I am a sucker for multi-level marketing. I will buy your bags. I will buy your kitchen utensils. I will buy the candles, and I will buy your beauty products. My husband, who's in finance, loves this fact about me. And just a while back, a long time ago, actually, when the boys were little, I had a friend come to me and she said, hey, I'm a consultant for this company. Would you mind getting like 10 or 20 or 40 of your friends together and we could just have like a spa night, a self-care night? And she's like, and I'll just show you all my products. Yes. You are going to, we're going to do facials for free? Yes. So I get everybody in the room, we're having a great time, and she showed me all of her products, and she explained to me why I needed all of them, and I was in. I was like, yes, I need all of those. And she goes, well, good, because tonight, if you buy it tonight, you're going to get a special deal. And I was like, well, then of course. Don't wait, hurry up. And it was such a special deal. She's like, hey, actually, you get the first half of the deal of all your products, and then you have to attend an entirely separate workshop later to get the second half of your products. That's how good this deal was. And I was like, sign me up, I'm in. And I did it, and I went to the workshop. I did not sign up to be a consultant. One, I'm terrible at sales on every level, but I was so excited, and I get there. And at the workshop, the speaker leads us through this exercise. And it has stuck with me forever, so I just want to share what she did. She said, hey, get out a piece of paper. So everybody in the room gets out a piece of paper. She said, I want you to draw 3 concentric circles, 3 rings. And I want you to share the priorities of your life from the inside out, the most important relationships in your world all the way out, most important things all the way out. So I was like, okay. 1, I work at a church, went to school for churchy things, and I knew what needed to be in the center ring. I put God. I got it right, I nailed it. The second ring, if I was honest with myself, what was getting the most of my attention and my energy was my kids at the time because they were little, but I knew that the right answer was supposed to be my husband, so I put Sal in the second ring. And then I'm trying to be a decent mom, and I put my kids on the third ring. And even though I know the speaker said 3 rings, I'm type A overachiever, so I was like, I'm just gonna add some rings. And I just kept adding rings, friends, family, and work. And the speaker gets up and she said, okay. She said, how many of you put your kids on the middle ring? Tons of hands go up. How many of you put your spouse anywhere? Several hands. How many of you put work somewhere on your circles? Lots of hands too. And she goes, okay, so how many of you put yourself anywhere on these circles? In a room of 60 women, none of us did. None of us put ourselves on any of those rings. And she asked this question: how do you expect any of the relationships on your rings to be healthy or solid if you aren't prioritizing yourself? Now buy all my products. That's exactly how that went. And that last point didn't really stick so much, but actually it did. But really it stuck with me. Because even though I know, let's be honest, we all know we need to care for ourselves. I'm just not always the best at doing it. I'm not good at self-care. I'm not good at caring for myself. And I think that the reason that sometimes we get hyper-fixated on this topic, though, because even though I know that I'm not good at it, there's a whole industry around it. Actually, in early civilization, it wasn't even a thing because they were just trying to survive. It was like kill or be killed, starve or hunt. And then later it becomes like a medical concept in the 60s and 70s. And then at academics, it starts to roll into academics. And now it's like this political talking point where your individuality and your autonomy is what's most important. And even though I wasn't practicing it well, I knew I was supposed to be. But I spent a lot of time caring for others, for companies, for other people's bottom lines, for other people's profits even. And most of us grew up in homes where we watched our parents maybe work, spend so much time investing in energy and work in a company that didn't even care for them at the detriment of their family. Or we saw people accumulate wealth or focus on their savings or focus on making more money rather than focus on building their character. Maybe we grew up in a household that really pursued that white picket fence, that American dream, and had to get that over actually pursuing peace. Most of us did not grow up in homes that talked about things like emotional or mental well-being or health, or even our physical health. We didn't have conversations around stress, anxiety, or depression. I think the reason sometimes we end up so far over here is because we spent so much time over here. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing, but I just want to have a conversation around, is that actually what we see in Jesus? Now, before we start diving into self-care and what it actually means, I do want to kind of have some clarity, because when someone says self-care, there's a lot of things that come to mind, right? There are actually meaningful habits and practices that I think actually do genuinely make you healthier and more whole as a person. There are also things that we label as self-care that are not actually fulfilling in our lives, that actually don't grow us or deepen our relationship with God or benefit our relationships with others, right? It's like, for example, I'm not talking about it's one thing to say I'm going to eat healthy, I'm going to exercise regularly. These are great forms of self-care. I'm going to practice. I'm going to get some time in nature, practice solitude, stillness. I'm going to jump into counseling, therapy, explore kind of what I need to be working on. That's not necessarily what I'm really talking about when I say maybe the pendulum has swung too far. I more mean how we do things like we eat poorly, but it's because we deserve it. We have one of those big, long days, and I just need that. I deserve to eat that or drink that. And we know that it's not what we need. But maybe it's also like activities in excess. Like, it's one thing to play, I don't know, I think like pickleball is like the thing right now. It's one thing to play pickleball like once or twice a week, but like 6, 7, 8, 10 times? Like, what is your hobby? What is your thing? I think sometimes I need that. This is my release. And I get that, but could we go too far with it? Or what does it look like more like, hey, it's one thing to come home from work and I just need to zone out for 30 minutes and just watch a show and just breathe. And then 5 hours later, I'm still just breathing. That's a different kind of thing. It's one thing to say, hey, I need some time by myself. It's a totally different thing to be like, the reality is I just have a lot of anxiety and I don't like people, so I'm going to isolate. It's a different kind of thing, or we're avoiding difficult conversations, but the way that we rationalize that is we call it boundaries. See, I think what I'm talking about here is not, we have a tendency to label things as self-care that are really ways that we're avoiding our anxiety or we're overindulging, and they aren't actually taking care of ourselves. Those are the things I'm more talking about. And how does all that fit? Whether it's the healthy form of self-care or the non-healthy form of self-care, like the fake form of self-care, how does all that fit when Jesus invites us to follow him? How do we practice self-care with Jesus? Now, I have this thought that we tend to kind of picture the Jesus that we like. Maybe it's because we grew up hearing about a particular kind of Jesus, or it's just a kind of Jesus that fits our narrative, right? But it takes a lot of time and energy and intentionality to actually make the effort to read the Bible to find out who Jesus actually was. And so, before I started kind of doing that in my life, I just pictured really busy Jesus. I loved busy Jesus because it rationalized my busyness. I just pictured him like going from town to town, healing everybody, having meeting to meeting with a Pharisee or whoever he's meeting with, right? And I actually spent the time in the Bible trying to figure out how I could make Jesus busier. In fact, I took the Mary Martha story. If you're familiar with it, it's this older sister who's mad, and she goes to Jesus and she says, hey, it looks like my little sister's not really doing much of anything. She needs to get up and help me. And I would tell myself, well, it's not because she was being too busy. It was because of her attitude, which I think is a little true, but also really it just fit my narrative better. And I actually took the time even to explore what Jesus actually did with his time, all to create this story of a busy Jesus. I went to Google and said, I'm sure that other people kind of picture Jesus being super busy too. And I said, Google, what's a busy Jesus look like? There was no Google images, but you know who you can ask now? ChatGPT. So if you're wondering what busy Jesus looks like, AI will tell you he looks like this. He is confused sometimes, right? Super stressed here, and the longer you look at the picture, the weirder his hands get. It's definitely busy Jesus is not the kind of Jesus that we really want to picture, but this is the narrative that I had built. I even went as far as to study all of the times that Jesus would be trying to get somewhere. Out of the 35 times Jesus is on his way to a specific destination, he is only successful to arrive at that destination 10 times without interruption. He's constantly interrupted. His attention is constantly being vied for. He's constantly thrown off track. And this built a story for me that, look, Jesus was busy, so it's fine for me to be busy. I don't need to worry about self-care. Jesus didn't worry about that. And he's Jesus. He seemed to do okay. Well, I guess not in the end. But but in the end, ultimately, that's a tangent. Okay, so I was building this story, but I didn't take the time to actually pay attention. And we see this in one of the biographies of Jesus. Luke records this. This kind of caught my attention. Yet the news about him spread all the more, so that the crowds of people came to hear him and to be healed of their sicknesses. But Jesus often withdrew to lonely places. I mean, I knew he was often interrupted. I knew he was often being asked to do something, to heal someone, to serve someone, to show up in something. But I didn't really want to admit that he was often taking time to go have a conversation with God, to center himself, to get himself grounded and rooted once more. And he did this often. Not only did he do this often, he actually instructed those that followed him, his disciples, to do the same. Let's look in the Gospel of Mark. We see because so many people were coming and going that he was speaking of the disciples, did not even have a chance to eat. Jesus says to them, "Come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest." It is clear, if you study how Jesus manages his time, his energy, his life, that he practiced self-care. He took care of himself. He often withdrew. But I think he did this for a purpose. I believe that Jesus practiced self-care as a means to an end. And I believe that the means to that end was to care for others. That everything Jesus did to take time, to often withdraw, to often get times to get alone, to be with God, he did it so that he could care for others better. And I partly believe this because I think that what the Bible recorded forever ago, science is just picking up on and reflecting. Just as much as I could show you a myriad of books and research and study on how important it is for you to care for yourself, and it is important, I could equally find you just as many books and as studies and as packets of research on how important it is for you to care for others. We are designed and wired in a way that we are supposed to be doing both. In fact, researchers study what they call blue zones, areas of the world where people live the longest. And one of the common threads is that they are in community doing life with others. When you give, when you practice generosity, your brain actually releases positive chemicals. It actually impacts your physical health, your mental health. You are designed to care for yourself, and you are designed to care for others. And we typically treat these two things as if they are opposites, as if like I can either choose one or the other. So we build up these narratives of self-care where I can't do anything because I've got to protect my time and my space and my bubble. And I think that there are times that you as an individual need to pay attention to that. But when we do that as a means to avoid having to actually care and love and serve others, I think that's different. I think we go too far. Because the reality is you are not made, you were not created or designed to be caught up in your own personal drama all day long. It's actually not good for you. In fact, researchers will tell you there's a direct correlation with people that are consumed with themselves and rates of misery. Perhaps that's even why we're seeing more and more diagnoses around narcissistic disorders where we are just swimming in our own stuff, in our own world. All in the name of caring for ourselves when really we're supposed to be also caring for others. How you care for yourself, the time that you spend over here, is intended to directly impact how you care for others. That's what we see in Jesus. We see that he takes time to withdraw. He takes time to be with God. He takes time to get still and to be alone and to get centered. Also, he takes time to teach, lead, serve, care. He does both because he recognizes the life that he was made for and the life that you're designed for, it's actually just not about you. That's not how it's supposed to work, and maybe sometimes that's why we struggle so much. It's because we either get in our own bubble, and we're not willing to look at others. What if Jesus practiced self-care? What if he took those times to withdraw because he knew it was the key to caring for others well? What if that's what it looks like to follow him? You know, we've been kind of sitting in John chapter 14 this entire series. And so I just kind of want to back up one chapter before that because Jesus actually gives us the indicator to know if you're following him. If this whole series we've been talking about what it looks like to follow Jesus, why we should, how everyone is invited, and what we could actually practically do. But Jesus says, hey, if you want to know what it actually means to be my disciple, what it actually means to follow me, I'll give you a clear marker, a clear litmus test. And let's see what John says. John records Jesus saying, by this, everyone will know that you are my disciples, that you follow me. If your calendar is full, the busier you are, the better follower you are. It's not the verse, just for clarity, not the verse. What does he say? He said, everybody will know that you are my disciples, that you follow me. If your calendar's empty, that you make time only for you and your nuclear family and your bubble, and that's the only thing that matters, that's not the marker. That's not the litmus test that he gives us here. By this you will know that you are my disciples if you read all the right books, if you do all the right Bible studies, if you listen to all the right worship songs. No, that's not the marker. If you take enough walks in nature, if you hike enough, if you get outside enough, that's also not the marker. None of those things are bad. And I could actually argue some of them are very, very necessary. But when Jesus says, if you want to know if you're following me, here's what he actually says. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you love one another. I mean, if you're doing all the things and you're checking all the boxes, but you can't forgive that family member and you can't deal with that coworker, what is following looking like? I mean, if you're accomplishing all the stuff and your calendar's full or your calendar's empty and you've done a great job protecting your time and you get lots of me time, but you're not deepening your relationship with your children or growing in respect for your spouse, I mean, this is what Jesus is telling us here. Hey, if you want to know what it looks like to follow me, it really is how well you are loving others. Jesus says this even about his own life. He says, for the Son of Man did not come to be served, but to serve. Jesus says, I didn't come about me. I came about you. And then I'm asking you to do the same. And when he's asked, what's the greatest commandment? What's the number one thing I need to be thinking about? This is Jesus' response. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, mind, soul, and strength. And love your neighbor as yourself. I mean, you have to care for yourself to know how to give care too, right? That's what Jesus is inviting us into. He's like, they're not separate. Loving me means loving others well. That is how you will know. One of Jesus' followers, Peter, says this, each of you should use whatever gift you've received to serve others. You've had things deposited into your life, but they're meant to be used for others. Paul, another follower of Jesus, explains it this way. Each of you should not look to your own interest, not look only to your own interest, but also to the interest of others. Look at this dichotomy here. Paul's saying you can look to your own interest, not only, you should pay attention to the things that you need. You should make sure you're getting time, you're being still, you're praying, you're eating right, you're moving. All these things are so important. But also look to the interest of others. When Jesus invites us to follow him, he's saying it's not this or that. It's not either or. It's not a pendulum. It's not back and forth. These things aren't opposite. They actually go together, and they form a circle. They form a pattern. Hey, Jesus is inviting us to, hey, let's you and I have conversations every morning so that then when you go to work and that person, and we all have that person. If you work at home, it might be the kids, but we all, so that you're better there, so that you love them well. It becomes kind of an overflow. Jesus says, hey, if you follow me, I want to show you how to love others and how to love yourself well. It's not either or, it's both. Because at the end of all of it, the life that you're designed to actually live is not about you. Now, I do recognize that you can take caring for others too far. In fact, I had a season in my life and continue to kind of sometimes bounce back to this season where that's what I was doing. I was complaining to a friend about how everybody was kind of pulling on me, demands. They wanted, I couldn't show up to all the things. I couldn't make all the parties. I couldn't show up for everybody all the ways. And I was just so overwhelmed and so stressed. And I didn't want anybody to be upset with me. It was really important to me that everybody be happy with me. And a friend who was kind and loved me well, she said, hey, I just want to point out that sometimes, love the people-pleasing thing, but do you know that, ultimately the people-pleasing thing is really kind of self-centered? And I was like, that makes no sense. I'm pleasing other people. She goes, you are more concerned with what they think of you than what they actually need. And it really just is trying to bring it back full circle to yourself. When you're all about making sure everyone's okay with you and no one's disappointed with you, you're actually making it about you. It's not really paying attention to what they need. It's just a different form of selfishness. The other reason I think sometimes we avoid self-care and we just focus on others is so that we can avoid. Because if I pay attention to everybody else's problems, no one has to see mine. Like, I don't want to be a burden, so I'll just pick up everybody else's burdens. And so no one actually has to see when I need something. See, that's not the rhythm we're invited into. Jesus allows other people to care for him, often lavishly even. He says, hey, look, care for you. I'll care for you. We'll care for others together. People will care for you. It becomes this rhythm, this dance, this pattern, not these opposites. Jesus is like, hey, it's not about you. I mean, it's not about you, but it is, but it isn't, but it kind of is. It's about us, but it's about you, but it's about everybody. And that's what he invites us into. Like, my analogy for this, the visual that kind of comes to mind when I'm thinking about this, is a cup overflowing. Oftentimes in Scripture, you read like, that God pours out his love, and we love like a cup overflowing. And so I picture this analogy as a part of this conversation, that like we are responsible for filling our cup. People will invest in our lives, and that's great when they do, but ultimately we are responsible for filling our cup, for taking the time that we need to be grounded, to be centered, to be rooted, to feel peace, to connect with God, whatever that looks like for you, right? I take my time every morning. In fact, my husband's love language is quality time. It's number 5 for me. And he loves coffee time together every morning. And I do too. And so when we have coffee, though, that's me filling his cup. But I do have to tell him sometimes, like, hey, coffee time's over. I don't have a timer. I'm not that neurotic about it, but not a bad idea. But I do tell him, like, hey, I gotta go be by myself for a second. It's just me and Jesus for just a second. And I need that time every day. Otherwise, my cup runs dry. So I have to fill my cup, but I fill my cup in order for it to overflow to a saucer then others can come and drink from. Like, can you kind of picture that for me? Like, if my cup overflows, I need to protect my cup. I need to fill my cup. I'm responsible for self-care. But it's so that it can overflow and be a gift to others and nourish others and serve others and be for others, because the life that we're made for is just not about us. So what do we do with all this? Just a few things, hopefully pretty practical. One, I just want you to build a habit. I want to challenge you to build a habit starting tomorrow if you don't already have it. Actually, it's 2 habits. I probably should have said build 2 habits. But the first habit is, will you daily take time to intentionally invest in your self-care? Like I said, for me, this means every morning I get some time in my Bible, I write a little bit, I pray, I just kind of try and like get quiet for a second. But whatever it looks like for you, will you intentionally every day take a minute to just be, to invite God in, to be still, be quiet? And then also, every day, will you take a second to make a difference in someone else's world? This can be in huge things or in small ways, like holding a door open for someone, send an encouraging text, ask someone how you can pray for them. Buy someone's coffee. It's National Coffee Day. Do that today. Whatever it is, can you invest in someone else? At the end of your day, could you sit and say, I added value to someone else today? And I invested in my relationship with God. I invested in myself. That's one thing. Another thing is just take an honest look at how you actually invest your time and energy. Like, take a look at what you are actually doing. Like, if I looked at your calendar, would it be all about you? Would it be all about busyness? Would it be all about others and no space for you to care for you or your family and deepen those relationships? Because others can sometimes actually be easier than actually dealing with ourselves. I don't know what it will be for you, but take an honest look, because at the end of the day, if you did all the things, you made all the to-do lists, you got all the stuff done, and the world wasn't any different, you made no impact in the world. You didn't impact your neighbor, you didn't impact your community, you just made no difference, really. But man, you got a lot of stuff done for you. Is that really how you want to end the day? And last, it's real simple, but just serve. Find a way to actually commit to building intentional time to investing in others. And that could look like a gazillion different things too. I don't know, maybe that looks like, there's so many ways and opportunities to serve, but can you set yourself up in a way that when you know at the end of that month or that semester or the end of that year, you're like, no, I made a difference in someone else's lives because I intentionally planned to do so. A few years ago, well, not a few, more than a few, I sat down, I made a list. When the boys were about 3 or 4, I asked myself what I wanted them to say about me when they were in their 30s. And so I made a list of things. It was kind of a hefty list. I knew it wasn't going to be a good cook. I knew that right out of the gate. They weren't going to say that, still don't. In fact, when they come home from college, I'd like, what would you like me to make? They're like, oh, nothing. But we can order, and I can order like a boss. But I knew it wasn't going to be my athleticism. I knew they weren't going to be like, Mom always played sports with us. Mom always tried might be on the list. But I am actually the mom that, like, when we divide, because I have the 2 boys, right? And when we're, like, picking teams, they're like, who gets mom? So, like, I knew it wasn't going to be that. But here's what I wanted. And we're not quite there. They're in their early 20s, so I don't know what they would say yet. You can ask them. But here's what I wanted, what was top of that list. I wanted my 30-something sons to say, my mom was always there for others and never missed her time with Jesus. That was what I wanted. Now, your list could be different. That may not be your things, but whatever's on your list, I want you to ask yourself that for a second. Because at the end of our lives, whether it's your kids that are going to say something about you or your neighbors, they're going to tell a story about you, and what do you want that story to be? Who do you want that story to be about? And here's the thing, if I wanted those 2 things to be the priority, I had to do them. It wasn't going to be enough to tell my kids, oh, you need to serve, you need to volunteer. I was going to have to do that. Oh, you need to be there for your friends. You need to support them. You need to encourage them. They were going to have to see me do that. They were going to have to see me bring people into my home. They were going to have to see me sacrifice my time and energy for others. And if I wanted them to grow up and say, Mom always spent time with Jesus, and maybe even that would be something that they would value themselves, they were going to have to see that too. They were going to have to wake up and know they can't interrupt me during that time. After I've already had coffee with Sal, then it's time. Like they were going to need to know, they were going to need to see me worship. They were going to need to see me show up. They were going to need to see Sal and I sacrifice and give. Whatever it is that's on your list, they're going to see you do it. And that's why, it's funny, we've done this whole series, the way of Jesus. We made this case that he's worth following, that he is Lord. And that the unique thing about this particular Lord is that he invites everyone to follow, which is crazy, actually. And there are ways that you can actually practice following, journaling, Jordan gave us massive lists. Go back and look. There's so many ways you can practice this, and that even when it gets hard, even when it gets tough, it's worth following. But all of that culminates in this idea that the reason that we follow, the reason we're invited to follow me, to follow him, is because to be for others. That's the test. That's the litmus test. That's the marker. You will know that you are following me through the bad things, through the practices. Everyone is welcome, but you will know what following looks like with how well you love others. It matters. That's what we're invited into this rhythm with Jesus, where Jesus says, hey, you and I have conversations regularly so that you can take care of yourself. You get still regularly. You get into counseling or therapy. You eat better. You get more active. Whatever your thing is, let's do this together so that we can invest in others. You fill your cup so that it overflows, because that's ultimately what you're designed for. And what's funny about it is it's actually what fills your cup full circle again. When you care for others, you're designed in a way that then pours back into you. This is how we're made. You don't have to believe in Jesus. You don't have to even know what you think about the Bible or even know what you think about all this morning. This is how you're designed. The Bible recorded it forever ago, but science is just now reminding us this is the rhythm we're invited into. We follow and we care for ourselves so that we can care for others. I want to pray for us. Lord, I thank you that you invite us into this rhythm. Lord, I thank you that you are the example. You often withdrew to lonely places to be with just you and God so that then you could step out and serve. I don't know what that looks like for everyone in this room. Some of us, we've stopped withdrawing into lonely places. We've been avoiding time with you, but others, we've been avoiding time with others. You know what each of us needs. You know what each of us, our calendars look like, our schedules, our priorities, our capacities. We want to do this rhythm with you. We want to be for you, with you, for others. Help us to see what that looks like in our individual lives. Help us to follow you well, and help us to recognize that because we will love others better. In Jesus' name, thank you. Amen. Guys, thank you so much. We'll be here next week. New series next week.